Welcome to the ABOP podcast. ABOP is the Alliance of Black Orchestral Percussionists, a nonprofit organization that focuses on mentoring future generations of Black percussionists. My name is Raynor Carroll. I am an ABOP founder. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Joining me for this episode is Ricky Burkhead, Professor of Music and Director of Percussion Studies, University of Mississippi. In this episode, Survive and Thrive, we will delve into Mr. Burkhead's journey in percussion and identify the essential skills required for a successful career as a percussionist. Be sure to check the program notes for episode 22 on our website for additional helpful information. Ricky, welcome back to the ABOP podcast.
Oh, hello, Raynor. Good to be here today.
Great to have you. Survival skills for the working percussionist. Now, this is a great subject that every percussionist should take time to consider. What does it take to survive and thrive? In other words, what are some of the things that I can do to ensure a long and relatively prosperous career in percussion?
Good question. We as percussionists, especially in the profession, are expected to play a wide variety of instruments in many different styles of music and situations. So I hope to offer insight to what it takes to survive and strive as a professional percussionist while preparing for an audition or waiting for a job interview or whatever else that you might be waiting to happen in your life. So we can talk about essential gear, fundamental technique, knowledge of styles, and then working in various musical situations.
Excellent. Let's hit it.
Okay. So I've found in my 40 years in the profession that there's so much that we can learn and do. And I've always been one who wanted to do just as much as I could in percussion or in music because I love music. So I like teaching, I like playing, and I love listening. And that's how I first became interested in music, from listening. We grew up in the Mississippi Delta, so our stations played music from around the country, but we had blues for sure. We had Stax out of Memphis, like Isaac Hayes. We listened to Motown. We listened to the sound of Philadelphia. And so from that, I was inspired to want to play drum set and hand percussion. And so that's the first thing I wanted to try to learn to do. So, I'd take little branches from trees around the house and play on a box or play on something, eventually getting knives out of the kitchen, playing on pots and pans. So I was drawn to percussion.
Careful with those knives, Ricky.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I didn't think they want to play piano or guitar at the time, but I wanted to play drums.
Yeah.
Of course, I started playing in a group before I joined the junior high school band. And I joined that late, so it turned out that they had all the drummers that they needed at the time because I had gone out for football. And going out for football, in those first 2 days, they ran us so much, I decided I didn't want to play football. Even though we had grown up playing football around the house. I grew up when we had at first 3 channels on the television, then we had cable, we had 8 channels. So We spent most of our time outdoors just playing. Played, so sports was my first interest, playing football, baseball, basketball. So I decided to go out for football. Well, after they ran us to death, I decided I wanted to follow my true passion and go and join the band. And so when I got there, they had all the drum positions filled and they gave me a trumpet. So I stayed.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So for 2 days I tried that and I say, well, I'm not going to do this. And I didn't join it. And this was my 7th grade year. So I didn't join the band again until my junior year in high school.
So, Ricky, when you say band, is this basically the marching band or is it a concert band or both?
It would be both. Of course, in the fall, the marching band was the thing we were drawn to the most. And then concert band was something extra we had to do since we couldn't march. But right. So we were thinking marching. Okay. And I had seen the marching band, and there were some guys from my neighborhood who played in the band who were really good. They could read and play, and they were very skillful. So I wanted to be like them since I like drums. And so that's why I joined.
Was this a predominantly Black high school you attended?
Of course, it integrated back in 1970. And by the time I came to school, my 9th grade year, it was like 55% white, 45% Black.
Boy, almost the same with me. Pasadena High School. Integration hit early 70s, and they bused me 5 miles away rather than the high school that was a mile away. And it was roughly 50-50. Yeah, same thing.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and it felt like a white world to me, even though
Yeah.
there were blacks there, it just felt like that, The
Yeah.
leadership was mostly white.
Yeah. That's interesting. Because we went to a school that prior was white, so that's why the environment felt that way.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We had to go to that school.
Right.
Yeah,
They didn't
yeah,
come to our school.
that's right. Yeah,
Right.
but I was in a really good band program. So when I did join the band in the 11th grade, of course, I played some drum set because I had started to gig a little bit by the time I was 14 with some grown-ups who were good musicians. As a matter of fact, several of those guys were band directors. And one of them was the band director at the high school that I was attending, and the other one was the band director at the county school, which was across town. It was an all-black school. So I learned a lot from being in the band with them, being so young, how to play drums on songs, how to play the song, and all those things. But I did not read. So when I joined in the 11th grade, we had the chair system, and we had 21 drummers, and of course I was 21st chair.
Oh.
And this is my junior year. So 21st chair. So the first thing I learned to do was to play traditional grip because I played match grip up until that point, but learned how to play the left hand correctly. And then I learned rudiments before I could read. So at the time, it was still the standard 26 standard American rudiments. It didn't have the 40.
Yeah.
And one thing that helped me out was Frank Arsenault, who was Johnny Lane's teacher when he was going to school in Houston.
Right.
He had an album that he had, the Ludwig Drum Company had produced his album with Frank Arsenault playing snare drum on the 26 standard American rudiments. So with the help of students who were in the band who played drums and then listening to that album, because I checked it out from school, I would go home and work on rudiments.
Uh,
And so I learned to do that before I could read. And then that same band director who I was gigging with taught me how to read. So I had a year to get that together. And then the next year I decided to challenge to try to go from 21st chair to something higher. Well, I made it.
you could
Yeah,
only go up.
I could only go up. So a lot of those guys saw my improvement. So they didn't want to challenge me. So the first 10 shares, and they just forfeited. So I moved up like
Wow.
to 11th share. And then I
Wow.
started to challenge within the top 10. And what we challenged on was rudiments,
Uh,
whatever the director called or if the other person called a rudiment, you had to play it. And we played out of the John Pratt book.
right.
So you had to take a solo out of the John Pratt book and challenge on it. And so I started to work my way up, beat the 11 chair guy. It gets kind of fuzzy now, but I remember going up to like fifth chair. And then the fourth chair guy, he was the son of the ROTC director, the chief petty officer. And I beat him. He was mad enough to fight that I beat him in that challenge. And I worked my way up to the first chair guy. And he was the guy I rode to school with. We didn't have a car, So he
Oh.
lived down the street. He had a car, picked me up every morning, or I went down to his house, and we were friends. And he was the first chair drummer. He was good. And the first time I challenged him, I beat him.
Oh.
And so he challenged me back after so long. He beat me. I challenged him back. He beat me again. And then the last time I challenged him, I beat him.
Over time, he must have saw this coming, though. When you were moving up, one by, uh-oh, Ricky's heading for me.
Oh yeah, yeah. You just don't expect it from a 21st chair guy who just joined the band a year before, right?
That's quite a story, man.
Keep in mind, this is all just rudimental snare drum. It's not like
Yeah, yeah.
total percussion, yeah. And
Right,
so,
right.
go
It's a
ahead.
good starting point, though.
It is, and that
Yeah.
was their system at the high school. Today, if you have to challenge someone for a cheer, of course, it's going to be on multiple instruments. You couldn't get away with that. So I know that I was first chair, but I was only playing rudimental snare drum, and that's all I played well until I went to college.
I see.
My first college year, I didn't have a teacher, so the department chair would teach me. But I was so interested in learning percussion, and I was in the marching band, so of course I was still doing the rudimental snare drumming. So I had the three Bibles for percussion at the time, which would have been the Modern School for Snare Drum, Goldenberg, Modern
Right.
School for Mallets, Goldenberg, and also the Timpani Method book by Saul Goodman.
Right.
And so, not having a teacher, I would read like the entire book. I read the forewords, all those things to try to get an understanding, and then just start working on the material. And the band director knew I was serious about what I was doing, so he would allow me to come in at night sometime to practice. He'd come in and lock up. So I learned a lot from that, and then also working with the department chair. And then my sophomore year is when Jeff Pelleton came, who was one of Johnny Lane's students, and they were the same age at the time. And Jeff had been in the Air Force, and he came to EIU and got his master's when he finished there. And he was a great teacher and motivator, and he introduced me to Johnny Lane. And so one thing I had to get together after that 1 year working on my own, we had to work on fundamentals. And so fundamentals for every instrument. And then it was the introduction to some things because I hadn't worked on everything. So fundamentals for snare drum, so not just playing the traditional grip, but playing match grip, which was super important. And then he introduced me to a style other than marching, which was like the concert style. And so working out of the Goldenberg, I did some work from there, but he refined my technique because he was a great player. So we corrected some things on my grip, and then we worked on proper movement. One thing I used to do a lot at that age, my sophomore year, every time there was a roll, I would accent it. We worked on. I don't know if you've seen that in students, just because
Oh, yeah.
accent it, crescendo it, just do all kinds of things to it, as opposed to just same volume, sustain it. So I became more aware and listened to it as I played. It's surprising how much you can play an instrument and not really listen to what you're doing. Just
Yeah.
get into the habit of doing it.
Right.
So we start to build some technique, and that's what I would say to any player, whether you're a beginner or you're a person who's at a university, you're about to enter to the job market. Make sure that you're sound on all the techniques, because you spend a lot of time listening to a teacher, and then when you have to teach it yourself, you have to really focus on what you're going to tell someone else. And at that point, you understand how much you actually understand it.
I think that's a great point there. I believe heavily in players teaching because of what you just said. You have to explain what you do to the student. And if you have some difficulty explaining why you do, maybe you need to question what you're doing. So it's not that you're going to end up being a teacher, but it really helps. For me, it helps my own playing to be able to explain why I use the arm, why I use my wrist, et cetera, at various times. So
Yeah,
I agree 100%.
yeah, that's a great point. And that was one thing I focused on when I was a student. I'm not sure if I set out to do that, but I would always think about how I could teach it to someone else. And at the university I attended, I had to do that before I graduated. I was in the marching drum line. I did well. I made the snare line as a freshman. That usually didn't happen at Mississippi Valley State University. And after 2 years, the band director made me the percussion coordinator. So he pulled me off the line, and so I'm in charge of the line.
Ah,
And so not only do I have to instruct the line, I got to determine the cadence, write the cadences. For show music, you had to write the parts to it. Everything wasn't written out back then. You might get a stock arrangement, or a lot of those arrangements were done by an arranger on the band staff, and so you had to percussion with it. And not always was it just a pattern that you can hold throughout the song. You had to orchestrate it. And
right.
I had to write the drum feature. Now I used to, at that time we had cassette tapes, so I would take that take the cassette tape and just rip off a solo that I liked. And we had a front ensemble somewhat. We had two glockenspiels or marching bells. We had Latin percussion. We had the marching line. And so I'll find something that would be great for us as a feature. And usually these features would be about 2 minutes, 1.5 to 2 minutes. And so I had to learn to transcribe by listening to a cassette tape, writing it down. So all the skills I was learning from the theory class and in arranging and in composition, I had to use it while still in college.
Great.
Which is interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a great responsibility I had. So it helped me a lot when he pulled me off the line, which I didn't want to do at first, but then I could see the big picture by being the coordinator and then have the responsibility to not only keep the line together, but to write or arrange for the line.
Yeah, so let me ask you here, when you're in college, what's your long-term goal? Are you thinking towards teaching? Are you thinking towards a specific career in playing? Or I mean, you're getting some arranging done now. What is your long-term goal at this point?
Yeah, I think it's important. One thing that helped me my sophomore year when Jeff Pelleton became my teacher, he just introduced me to a whole new world of percussion. He introduced me to Johnny Lane. I went to my first PASIC in New York City, 1979 as a sophomore, so I could see a big scope. It was that year that I began to really focus on what I wanted to do. So the first thing I knew, I wanted to go to graduate school. So, and also I wanted to be better at everything that I did. And
Great.
I know I'm like you. I was interested in everything that they taught in the music school. No, not just the percussion lessons, but the arranging, and just
Right.
not for drums, but I began to write for instruments,
Yeah.
and so my senior year, I wrote an original piece. It was called "Light of the World." It's on my CD now, but it made it to the show. So for our halftime show, it was the second song in the show.
Wow.
It was also in the parades when we marched down the street. Another buddy of mine, and one of his tunes were in there too. We've been lifelong friends, so we took arranging serious. Not
Yeah.
just writing for your instrument, but like
Right.
liking music in general.
Shining bright for all to see. He's the light of the world.
But to talk more about my focus, I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, and I didn't want to teach high school. I wanted to teach college. So I had to go to grad school to get a master's at least to do that.
Right.
And I just kept all the things that we learned from the theory classes to arranging, all the stuff I learned as a coordinator, all the experiences we had in college from marching band to I played in the orchestra, played in the symphonic band. We didn't have a wind ensemble, but our top group was a symphonic band, played in the percussion ensemble, percussion jazz rock ensemble, and we had a bunch of other ensembles. So everything. Yeah, I had time, so I didn't have anything to distract me. Didn't have to work, nothing. Just do music. And so I think that helped to shape me. So I just paid attention to what was happening so that I could build a career on
Yeah.
that.
You're already starting out to be a very versatile percussionist.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, and I know that's the point that we're making. You got to be versatile. Otherwise, you're going to limit your life. You're going to limit your profession. You're going to limit your income, almost everything.
I agree.
So, how about the developing the different styles?
Yeah. So, like I said, Jeff Pelleton introduced me to the concert style of playing percussion.
Hmm.
And so for the snare drum, it's marching, it's concert, and then there's variations on that. So orchestral requires even more skill. And it's technique, dynamics, interpretation, those things, and that I learned as I begin to continue to study percussion and grow because as a young player it takes some mentoring, it takes listening, and that was important too. We started listening to we still would listen to cassettes back then, but we started listening to symphonies that we normally wouldn't have heard because our orchestra couldn't play those things,
Oh,
small
right.
orchestra. So we started listening to Stravinsky, started listening to Beethoven, and just building repertoire just through listening. So establishing a listening list, and I think that helped out a lot to introduce me to that. And the main symphony orchestra in our area was the Memphis Symphony, and I used to go there from time to time to hear a live concert, and that was great. Now, styles are super, super important when it comes to another instrument, the drum set, which I think of as a multi-percussion instrument.
Hmm.
Not just a dance band instrument, but it's a very versatile instrument. I played in community bands where I was the only percussionist, and of course, you had to do that from the drum set because you're the bass drum, the snare drum, and the
Right.
cymbals. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And some of these bands have people who retired, but they were great musicians and they can still play great. So
Hmm.
it's a good experience.
Yeah.
So for drumming, as I mentioned before, I grew up listening to the radio, and eventually we had a 8-track player. That was our first player, and along with the phonograph. And so my sister was the first to build a pretty great record collection, and later on my brother built a great record collection, and I spent time listening to that. And this is mostly popular music, R&B's, funk, soul. And then I got some other more classical type music from televisions like the Lawrence Welk Show and shows
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then occasionally seeing like symphony players. Like the very first concert pianist I saw on television was Andre Watts
Mm.
playing piano. I was amazed that he was black and he's playing
Yeah.
classical piano.
Right. What's wrong with this picture?
Yeah. He was sounded great. And so that was inspiring. Like stuff like
Yeah.
that just ignited
Right.
me. Yeah. It just
Yeah.
inspired me. So you can
Yeah.
do these things.
You didn't happen to see any black percussionists in the orchestras, did you?
Uh, I don't recall.
I knew the answer to
Yeah.
that.
Because the main orchestra I saw was the Boston Pops.
There you go. Same here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sundays afternoon. Yeah.
Same thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was his name? He was a section player, but he also
Oh,
played drum set. Fred
yeah.
Fred
Fred
Buddha.
Buddha.
Yeah,
Buddha.
Fred Buddha.
Yeah.
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 So he's the
Yeah.
first classical player that I recognized because he was versatile. He played in the section, but he also could play drum set.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure how I learned his name, but I knew that. But yes. So John Williams was the conductor that I saw the most
Uh-huh.
doing the pops. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's a very powerful media for us in the 70s, 80s, because, it was our internet, it was our YouTube, right?
Yeah,
Except, we could only watch something like that when it came on. We didn't have the choice of having it come on instantaneously like they do nowadays with YouTube. But my point is, that's what we had. And at least some of us, like you and me, we used it. We used that to our advantage to learn. I was attracted to it, just like you were, and I would, make
yeah.
a point to be able to watch whatever was on the program. And eventually, I guess during the winter season, it would be the Boston Symphony, and that's where I first got to see Vic Firth and
Ah,
see and hear him play, with the orchestra. So very influential thing. So it wasn't just the eight tracks and the cassettes, had
yeah.
plenty of those, but also what we saw on TV. And like you said initially, we had very few channels compared to now. It's like, man,
Even in California, you guys didn't have that many.
oh no, no, not when I was, very young. It was like three networks, and maybe it went to four, and there was a public station, PBS, and that's mainly where the orchestras were on there on the PBS network. But yeah, it's over the years it grew into, like you said, cable and HBO and all that,
Yeah,
and then satellite and et
yeah,
cetera.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay, so yeah, we grew up very similar.
yeah, we used what we had.
Yeah, that's true. So some of the instruments I learned to play growing up were instruments I had to go and put on layaway. My first drum set was on layaway. My mother bought it for me, and I was 12. So I can remember that day, like certain days you can remember in your life. You
Yeah.
can't remember a lot of them, but that day going to pick up that drum set, bringing it back, I can remember certain sceneries and thoughts as we went along the way because it was a super important day for me. And
Oh yeah.
set it
Yeah.
up in the backyard, and it was a three piece. It was kick, snare, a mounted tom, and a cymbal, no hi hat.
Right, right.
And
Wow, wow.
so the first thing I played on it was a cadence. Boom, ka-tak, digga, 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 boom, ka-tak, digga, digga, digga. All day, all day. And then there was a guy around the corner who had a really nice slingerland. My drum set was like from a store called Rose's, which is like buying something from Walmart or
Right, right.
Penny's. It's just
Yeah,
made in Taiwan. And
yeah.
he had a nice slingerland with a hi hat. And so I said, I got to get one of those hi hats. Somehow I found some really cheap cymbals somewhere in the garbage can or so, and I got a hi hat stand, and I rigged up something to put those things on there. And that was my first hi hat
Uh,
until I got a better drum set. But
yeah.
during that time, I was interested in like other percussion too. So my first conga, I found it like in a dumpster. It was a wood. It was a wooden conga. It was cracked, and it had like some African carvings on it, but it still had a calfskin head on it, and it
Uh,
was tunable. You can tighten it down, although the head was
yeah.
pretty worn out. And I had no technique, so I played it like I was playing drum set, or like you would play on the desk, hitting my fist on in the center to get the bass, and a little
Right,
slap on the end. Yeah.
right, right.
So I kept that for years. I would go and put it on layaway at the local music store. I remember putting a kabasa on layaway, and it probably costed $21. A cowbell, a triangle, like at different times. Put these things on layaway and then get them out when you could. And that's all I had. And I got a better drum set right before I graduated from high school. It costed
Mm,
$400. It was called Apollo. It's made in Taiwan.
yeah.
I took that to grad school with me. It never changed till I got to grad school. My last year in grad school, I got a Gretsch, but
Uh,
that was it. So I became interested in those instruments during that time, and so I played them, imitating what I've heard on records. If I caught someone on television, like some great shows that influenced me was like the Midnight Special,
yeah. Yeah.
Don Kirshner's Rock.
Right, right.
Yeah. So I would see live music, especially on the
Yeah.
Midnight Special. You saw all the live players come on there, all the groups that you like. And then you see
Right.
them playing and you just try to do the things that they did
Hmm.
on those instruments. So that's how I got interested in a lot of different types of percussion
Right,
instruments.
right. I think it's a good thing that we got started on simple and cheap and basic things
Hmm.
because I think it makes you focus more on what you have.
Hmm.
Instead of having a full drum set with a hi-hat and three toms and you made the most of what you had, and you got more creative, I think, that way. And then looking back, it helps you to appreciate where you've come from.
I agree.
Yeah,
It does.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So all you students out there that have a crappy Pearl symphonic snare drum, no, no,
Yeah.
that you are blessed. Let me tell you.
You are. You are. Yeah. Back when I was that age, a kid's drum set was like a terrible. It was like a paper head, a tin
Yeah,
shell.
yeah.
Now you can get something that's considered to be junior or a kid. It's like a professional thing.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Anything with a name brand is going to be good.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
So I started talking about drum set, about listening. So that was super important. And what made me want to play drum set, we talked about it earlier, was I heard those rhythms. I was drawn to that. And so as a drummer, I always tell anybody who wants to play drum set that first of all, you need to try to imitate another drummer. So imitate them to find out what they're doing with the bass drum, what they're doing with the snare, what they're doing with the hi-hat. Try to pick it up. So I created this list of what I call drum beats every drummer should know. I gave some of these beats names. Some of the names are sort of standard, people would know them, but some of the names I gave to them, and I had to explain them. So, for example, the very first one on the list I call Moneymaker, and that's because so many hit songs have been made with this beat.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, for example, Billie Jean by Michael Jackson, Back in Black by AC/DC, Lucille by Little Richard. So if you look at this list, you'll notice that everything in this list I have in black, but then I have something in red. And that means that it's very similar to that beat, but there's something special about it. For example, so I'll just sing the beat. It's just hi-hat, snare, and bass drum. Do, do, tat, do, do, tat, do, do, tat, do, do, tat. That's it. Now, so on Lucille by Little Richard, the drummer plays that beat, but instead of playing the hi-hat with his right hand or left hand, he plays it at the edge of the snare drum, and then he plays the backbeat in the middle of the snare drum. So he gets that do do blah do 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 da da do do. Yeah. So it's very similar to Moneymaker, but it's got something special about it. Some of the other names is Four on the Floor, and that's pretty common. Rock Beat number 1 and number 2, they're very similar. Pop Groove number 1 and number 2. And then we have the boom chicks. And under the boom chicks, you got the polka, boom chick, boom chick, boom chick, boom chick. You got the train beat, you got the march, boom, those are all boom chicks. And then the doo-wop, someone else might not call this a doo-wop. They might call it something else, but I call it a doo-wop. Boom, dot, dot, boom, dot, boom, dot, dot, boom, dot. One example of a song for that is the Monster Mash.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They did that
I
mash,
remember that.
You remember that?
Oh yeah.
So that's a part of my listening. Like the student listen to that and they try to copy it. Then I've got New Orleans by Gary U.S. Buns, and then I've got some other, Cupid by Sam Cooke. The drummer does not play that on Cupid, but you can use this beat on Cupid and it'll work in a live situation.
I see.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's the jungle beat, which is a lot of toms on the drum set. And I teach in the very basic jungle beat, but the jungle beat could be a variety of things. And you hear a lot of jungle beats in contemporary Christian, they call CCM music these days, because there's a lot of space. So the drummer has to fill in the time. So they do a lot of jungle beat type stuff to make it work. So those are some of the names. So it's 2 pages of that, and then we finally get into the Latin percussion beats or the Latin American beats. And then I also have something included that I sent to you. It's called Get Paid. And that's an acronym, and this was put together by a former student, Fred Dunlap III, who was also Don Parker's student in undergrad, and he came to Ole Miss to get his master's. And he's excellent as a player, also as a teacher. And he put this together. And what that acronym stands for is, so each letter has a meaning. So get paid is, he talks about gear, he talks about energy, he talks about timing, and then that's get. And then the next thing, being prepared, an assortment of things that you can do, not just being a one-trick pony. Interpersonal skills, that's super important, being able to work with somebody, and then also that you can communicate. Dependability. So get paid is all those things: gear, energy, timing, prepared, and assortment, interpersonal skills, and dependability, being dependable as a person.
I like all of those. And what sticks out to me are the last 2 personal skills, because in what we do, we have to deal with other people. And everybody's not, let's, how do I put it? Everybody's not pleasant to work with, or everybody has their own thing. So you
Yeah.
got to learn how to deal with that. And it's whether it's accepting or whatever, however you want to put it, it's very important. It's
Yeah.
something that we don't normally have a class in at school, that we learn how to get along in a certain way in our musical studies. And
Yeah.
then dependability. I always say, I don't care how great of a player you are. If I can't depend that you're going to show up, I don't want you. I don't
Hmm.
want you. You've got to be dependable and reliable.
Yeah. And I know you being a principal and then also being an educator and then being a clinician and your world travel, you have to deal with that type of thing on a constant basis.
Yeah, drives me crazy.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And then to put it on students, I have had fantastic students that were not that dependable or reliable, and it's unfortunate. I could see their careers going in a certain way because they're limiting themselves and not realizing that it's not just about how you play, but it's who you are. And
Yeah.
if someone can depend on you,
Yeah. I've had the same experiences with students, so I understand that.
yeah,
And sometimes you try to warn them that it's not going to get any better if you don't fix it, you know?
right. What do we know, man?
Tell me about it. Yep. They don't get it until when they come back for that, they need that reference.
There you go.
They
There
need
you
that.
go.
It's like, I always tell them now that, man, let's just do our best to get along. You do what you have to do. I do what I have to do. And so when time comes when that you have to enter to the job market, I'm going to get that recommendation email every time from
Yeah,
somebody or reference, and I
right.
want to I want to speak the truth.
Yeah, I don't think they quite understand that when you make that letter and you sign your name, it's like you're on the hook there,
I
because
I agree.
you said this person is an excellent musician, they're reliable, they've helped this way and that. And then when you don't follow through, it's like, okay, well, there goes this recommendation.
Yeah,
I can't really depend on what this teacher said about you because it's not true.
that's a
You
good
know?
point. I totally agree with that. Yeah, hate to be in that situation. I've had some like that.
Oh
would
yeah.
not would not do what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Would not do what I told them, and didn't have a good relationship. And lo and behold, when the time comes, just had to look at all the things that I did when I was growing up, my hard
Yeah.
headedness and rebellion and things like that, and try to understand where they're coming from. Moving
Well,
forward.
I mean, that's the thing. We all have those times, those moments, but I always say you got to learn from it.
Hmm.
What was the positive? What's the negative? It was a negative. How can you improve that in the future?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
that's how you grow. You learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't keep repeating them.
yeah. I totally agree.
Get paid. I like it.
Yeah, get paid. Yeah, and reading and interpreting is important for not just a drum set player, but for anyone. But if it was dealing with drum set, one of the better books on this for anyone, it's great for beginners and also good for intermediate and even advanced players would be A Fresh Approach to the Drum Set. That's a book by Mark Wessels. He's a great pedagogue in that he puts things together in a very systematic way. He also has some help from this one from Stan Moore from New Orleans, great drummer from down that way. And in that book, he starts off with basic techniques and styles, but he has tracks to go with everything in the book. So you learn to play whatever style it is, like some of the ones I named, drum beats every drummer should know, up to Latin, up to jazz, with great explanations that breaks it all down. And then you can play along with the tracks. So it's a great experience to work on reading and interpreting and then record it so you can hear yourself back playing with a track to see how it feels.
Takes us to recording and gear, yeah?
Yeah, and so I've got a list of some basic things. So of course you need a computer and you have a variety of places that you can stream, but for just your own personal use, a computer, and you need an interface, and that's going to be what communicates to the computer from your microphones. And I recommended a starter pack, by Focusrite. There's two channels and it comes with a microphone. And although you're recording drums, you can get by with this one microphone placed strategically to get the best sound. You need some headphones and, of course, the cables that go with that. And then recording software, the free software would be Audacity. Anyone can get that for PC or Mac.
Mm-hmm.
And then I use the Apple products, Logic Pro. But Pro Tools is available, and then Reaper is one that I hear a lot of people using. I use Pro Tools.
Hmm.
It's good to have a keyboard controller. You can plug that right into your computer and just manipulate the sounds from your recording program. You can 61 keys is great. If you want to do 88 keys, you can. But if you start with 61, a great controller would be that Novations Launch Key 61 MK361. And then you need some monitors. If you don't, now use headphones would suffice. But if you want to hear something out in the room, I recommended an inexpensive pair of monitors, Personas. Elisa's also makes a pair too, and these are somewhere in the $100 to $199 range. Might seem like a lot, but it's worth it as an investment to get those things, and you'll be good to go.
So, just a reminder to listeners, all of the specifics will be in the program notes for this episode. So, just check that out.
So the next area is hand percussion. And you can get a lesson for free from a multitude of people on YouTube. That's the beauty of YouTube. You can go there and just put in whatever you want to do, and there'll be somebody teaching it to you from basic to intermediate to advanced on YouTube. I can recommend a bunch of books, but if you go there first, then that might lead you to some books. And for hand percussion, there's three things that's common between most hand drums, so congas, djembe, and even the cajon, is that there's a bass tone, full hand, there's the tone, which is closer to the edge, not on the edge, but you get all your fingers, all the pads to make the sound, and then there's the slap, where you can also use the pads, sometimes a little less, to produce a high sound, so you have low, medium, high. Need to be able to produce those sounds. And then there's some tones in between, like the muted tone, there's a muted bass, the muted slap, variations on the tones. But those are important things. So technique is super, super important. And if you have good technique, you don't have to try to play so hard or so weird and do things with your hands that are not flowing.
Right.
Like, for example, when people say the slap, people try to strike it real hard to get the sound. It's actually the technique. It's the part of the hand that strikes the drum, which the tips are making that sound. So you can play and not just stress yourself out on that. That's important. Concerning those toys, the auxiliary percussion instruments, I told you I became interested in that way back when I was putting all those things on layaway. And I played them the best I could, and I tried to imitate what I heard on recordings. But some essential instruments to have a tambourine, a cowbell, triangle, and then smaller auxiliary things like clave, whirro, maracas. And once again, you can go to YouTube or other sources, and someone is teaching some basic stuff on there about how to play those instruments. And that's a big plus to have that to do those things.
Yeah, wouldn't you say that's a good start? As in, go to YouTube for free. You can rewind it or keep playing it over and over, and you practice. But then the next step is actually find a live teacher that you can interact with, and they can hear your sound.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, take you to the next level. Because
Yeah.
I always say there's a ton of us percussionists that are mediocre. You don't want to be another mediocre percussion. What's going
Amen.
to help is if you have a private teacher that you can go to. Of course, it's going to be a little bit more of an expense,
Yeah.
but I say it's an investment in your future.
Yeah. Well worth it. I totally
Yeah,
agree. Yeah.
yeah,
They can see
great.
things that you don't see, like in your stance, your movement, all those things. Tone production, stuff that you would miss. A teacher could hear those things and help you with
Yep.
them.
So speaking of a teacher,
Yeah, there we go. And we talked about this a little earlier. Know the fundamental techniques for all instruments. As a student, we spend a lot of time receiving instructions, and we might teach some. I've got students who are pretty unique in that they're doing WGI, they're doing DCI, they're going back to teach at their high schools, not only in the summertime for the camps, but they're being hired throughout the year. So they're
hmm
teaching younger students. So they learn very early on how to relate and how to put together like a lesson plan, like set goals for that particular lesson. And I think they're very good on time. And that helps me out a lot in the percussion ensemble, especially on the tough pieces that we play, because they want to play those tough pieces. And so in the rehearsals, whatever section is rehearsing, like the woods are rehearsing or the metals or so, someone's leading that rehearsal, and they're very efficient on their time. So I've learned some things from them. That's one thing about this generation. They're exposed to a lot, and the ones who take advantage of it are really good at it. They're writing music. I got some kids who, they're freshmen. man, after rehearsal, they're sitting around, they're on their computer, and they're writing like a show, like for indoor percussion, the battery and the front ensemble, very serious, and so they want to like pitch these shows and sell them if they could. So it's
Yeah,
great that
yeah,
they're using that theory and that compositional skills and things to do that.
excellent.
So that's important, and then versatile enough that you can teach concert or symphonic styles, and also marching. And I just talk a little bit more about marching. When I was doing marching camps in the summer, I don't do that anymore. But I was able to relate to the front ensemble, which would be the mallets and the concert percussion, but also teach the battery too. Today, there's a lot of students who are like mostly mallet players, and you have to work with them on drums, and they become afraid of drums after not playing drums all those years, or being made to in high school. They would just call upon to do all the mallet stuff. And then you have the drummers who don't play as much mallets.
Right.
We're fortunate that in this town, like we have two high schools, the county school, which is right down the road from me, and then we have the city schools that they all have to take lessons on all the instruments. And so when they come to an audition for college or when they're playing in the percussion ensemble, they're switching off. And fortunately, those students were students at our university. Now they've been out for a while, and they already were good at what they did before they came to me. So I won't take credit for that, but I try not to hurt them when they come. Let them continue to grow. Don't take anything away. Don't stop them.
Right.
Let them do their thing. But they're great teachers, and so those kids come out well versed. They have to be refined though when they come to college because when you're doing band or even percussion ensemble, it's very regimented. So although they can put together a great piece and they can learn dynamics and things like that, when you take them away from that group dynamic and an individual player, they're sometimes a little rough on
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Right.
have you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Stiffer, very calculated in what they do. They have to learn to find out who they are as a musician to be musical and expressive and dynamics.
Right. Yeah. Not very nuanced and not a lot of finesse. It's all about power and
Yep.
yeah. But, the ones that get it do and they realize they've got to adjust. And, I put it as for me, the more obvious is when you have an instrument that resonates, I'm going to hear more how you're hitting that instrument
Yeah.
versus, wood block or snare drum, which you could still tell, but
Yeah.
especially on the bass drum and timpani, anything that vibraphone, marimba, your
Yeah.
touch really, really makes a difference.
I agree. And I would throw cymbals in there too.
Yeah.
I've never heard so many loud crashes.
You know what I tell them the first thing is you got two pieces of metal, you don't have to really be very percussive in bringing them together.
Yeah.
It's like two trains that you gotta smash. So be as caressing as possible as you can, and you're gonna get a beautiful sound. Otherwise, people are gonna back away from your cymbal crashes.
I agree. I like the way you put that. I'm just amazed that they don't think anybody can hear those things. And in places where it's just like the cymbal crash, there's nothing but the crash.
Right,
And I
right,
wait
right.
for the band directors to tell them. Like sometimes you don't always get that from the band director. Like, can't he hear that bass drum is too loud? That cymbal crash is. We can hear those things.
Yeah, well, that's where you separate the percussionists and the musicians, or the musician percussionists. You
Yeah,
know, those folks get it, but the non-musical percussionists, they don't see that. They're like, hey, it says two Fs, it says three Fs. I'm gonna give it a good smack.
oh
But does it
yeah,
fit in the music? Well, the composer wrote two Fs, you
oh
know?
yep, yep. Constantly getting that from these younger players.
Yeah,
Even
yeah,
on solo things, like they say, "What's two Fs?" I say, "Well, you're the only person playing. You can determine how loud it is, how soft. It's, two Fs don't mean you play 18 inches. That's what they learn in marching, like 18
right.
inches, 16 inches.
Yeah,
Yeah, so they have to
yeah,
learn to. You did mention about timpani, like you listen to like sustaining instruments to tone.
right,
I've seen some guys who can get around the timpani, but I don't think they heard the tone at all. They play them like they're playing marching tenors.
right,
They
right.
they well on those things, and they can get around it. Like they got the skills to do it, but you have to just stop them and just get them to listen to the tone of it, like the sound that
Right.
you're making, and like
Exactly.
don't play with those hard mallets.
You don't have to project into a stadium. It's
There
just a
you go.
stage.
Yeah, you have to
But
like
that's the thing. It's not obvious to them, and that's okay. They need to learn from that.
I agree.
It's not about the power, it's about the sound you make when you're contained in a hall, you know. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. When you're outdoors, it is different. I mean, that's where we came from, timpani on horseback, you know,
Mm.
marching
Yeah.
with the army, the military. But now
Yeah.
we've kind of refined that a bit and we brought it into the concert hall and
Oh
we're
yeah.
playing with violins, not just trumpets and whatever. So,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
change your sound, change your approach.
Yep. Be musical.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. We're
Yeah.
playing music, so we should be musical. When you're playing your cadences, you can blast away, but when you're
Yeah.
playing other things, it needs to fit the music, whatever the music is. And
Yes,
yeah,
it does. I agree. I
yeah,
think when they have to teach that, they become more sensitive to that because they've got to teach the students how to make sounds, and then they're listening to, and they're listening to what they're
yeah,
saying. So I think that
yeah.
helps, So the pedagogy is super important.
Yeah,
And
everything we do, I think it's good to be on the other side also. So whether you're on stage,
mhm,
it's good to be out and be a listener, or whether you're in a lesson, it's good to be on the other side and be the teacher.
yeah,
It gives you a different perspective.
yeah, I agree. I think composing and arranging is as important for student, whether it's for percussion ensemble or for symphonic composing or marching percussion, and that's something they have to work at. Hopefully, they'll be interested. One thing I've found with some students is that once they take class piano in theory, they never really apply that stuff. It was just a class they had to take. They've learned some things. I've learned this from working with them on ear training for timpani, and I've been shocked at what I've heard, even though they take sightseeing and things like that.
Yeah.
Until we talk about it and we take out your book and say, hey, for you to get that next interval, you can't sing up the scale to get that pitch. You got to go from the root. So you need to learn these songs. You need to know what song goes with the major second, what goes with it. Like our common intervals, the most common, the perfect fourth, perfect fifth, perfect octave. You need to know the songs.
Right.
Old Lang
Right.
Syne,
Yeah.
Twinkle Twinkle, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But they would sing those stepwise to those pitches all day, and then don't talk about descending intervals.
Right.
That's
Right.
the thing,
Yeah.
yeah. So we start ear training. Once they become aware of it, they realize that they have some things that they're missing. So we start working on it. And I try to get them to tune quickly. I say tuning for me is a three-step process. Hear the pitch, sing the pitch, tune the pitch. Don't go do 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 on the tip. One strike, let's tune that pitch.
Yeah. I always say it's the first thing on timpani. I don't care if you've got the most smoothest roll, if you've got the most delicate touch, if
Yeah.
it's always out of tune, it ain't gonna work. There's no other way to put it. You got to be in tune on timpani. I'm just sorry. That's the way it is. It
I
doesn't come factory tuned.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. And if you can't hear that, man, there's a problem on
Yeah.
that.
That's a problem. Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you about
Yeah.
that. What devices do you use to tune? Like, what do you have on your stand when you're playing timpani?
I have a tuning fork. Tune the pitches I need. Orchestra comes and they tune. I check to make sure it's good. We play the piece, whatever. Next piece, I just use the pitches that I've just played to tune the next set.
Oh man, it's beautiful. I like that.
But that's where I am now.
Yeah,
I started on drums that had no tuning gauge, and I am so thankful for that
yeah,
because I see a lot of the students now rely on the gauge. They tune up before rehearsal and set the gauges and all that.
yeah,
But during the piece, they will use the gauge and, changing to the next piece or whatever they'll.
yeah,
And I would say for me, I had an advantage of not having gauges on the drums I had, and I had to use my ear.
yeah,
So over time, and it's not a month, it probably took years to develop my ear where I
yeah.
could tell, or I knew all the intervals because I had to tune them, you know?
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll have that laid out so well in your book. What I just said about the three-step process, I actually took that from you. Like,
Okay.
hear
Okay.
the pitch, sing the pitch, tune the pitch. You might say it a little different, but that's the essence of it right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And another thing is any student that comes to my house for a lesson, and maybe I'm going to lose a few students now, but that's okay. The timpani in my house, they have gauges, but I cover the gauges with Velcro.
I love that.
So they can't see. They
Yeah,
still look, but
yeah,
they can't see where the pitches are. They have to use their ear. And
yeah.
another thing I do, and again, I'm going to lose some students, but that's okay. You want to learn it this way is when they're tuning, let's say an A and D, I
Yeah.
got the stereo in the studio. I'll play Mozart Symphony 39 in E flat while they're tuning in A and D.
I love it.
And not that I'm trying to make it hard for them, but I'm like, this is what you need to do on stage.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need to be able to hear that pitch, even though it's E flat major and there's no D in the chord, and you
Yeah.
need a D or an A, you need to do that, you
I
know.
love it. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. My studio
They don't
also.
love it. They don't love
I know it.
it.
They
But
get
I
dependent.
think hopefully you ask them now that studied with me years ago. They say, "Yeah, I'm glad I went through that process and it was a pain in the butt, but it actually paid off. I think I tune pretty well now because I had to back then."
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, my studio also has some Ludwigs that don't have tuners, well, don't have gauges on them. So when they come in, they have to use the ear. Whereas the other ones in the building all have gauges. But then
Yeah.
those gauges are subject to the person who sets
Well,
them.
yeah, that's another thing. You set the gauges and it's not necessarily accurate. It's meant to be a guide. It's not meant to be, the ultimate, as in,
Yeah.
okay, this is where my C is always going to be. No, 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 no.
So that's why that C moves during the rehearsal or during the
Yeah,
performance.
someone didn't come over and move the indicator. It's just called pitch. It just changes. I will use the tuner as a guide to put on a head and maybe to clear a head. But I
Yeah.
find the tuner and what the tension, what's it called? Drum dial.
Okay.
Those things to me, they're not 100% accurate. I'll tune it to the drum dial and I'll
Yeah.
play the timpani and it sounds bad and I'll just tune it by my ear. There you
Yeah.
go. So you
S-
can't rely on technology in the real world, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just it's like digital versus analog. It's just
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. That is interesting what you said about that drum dial, like tuning it to that and it sounds bad, then you use your ear. I had a student who had perfect pitch.
Uh-huh.
And she could tune the timpani, but when we have our juries, like the other instrumentalists on the panel, could tell that those things, although she had perfect pitch, they weren't exactly in tune the way they should be. I had never thought about that till they said that.
Somebody needs to do, or probably someone's done their thesis on this, and it's like
Yeah,
I don't know. I do not have perfect pitch. I do have a sense of relative pitch. You get sing me a B flat, I can sing all the other notes.
yeah,
So, but I can't tell you necessarily if someone's singing a D or an A. I may have an idea. But
yeah,
my point is, as long as you have relative pitch and you can hear that you're sharp or flat, that's going to be very helpful, you know.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm somewhat like that too. I can remember like a song. It could be like from any genre. Like when it starts, like I can hear that pitch from
Yeah,
that
yeah.
song. It's not.
Right,
I'm not perfect in that, but I know what that pitch is going to be on that song.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, the
yeah.
student I mentioned before, like when we in percussion ensemble rehearsal, and she was never dogmatic about it at all. But if we played a chord on the keyboards and there was something wrong, she can just tell what the wrong note was. She might just ask, "Well, is someone playing the G sharp and it should be G?" She was great. She was good on everything, like really good.
Great,
Just
great.
got yeah. But she was
Yeah,
nice about having that perfect pitch.
that's good.
Yeah,
We're not all there, so she understood that.
yeah. And I've had quite a few that were percussionists that have had perfect pitch.
Mm.
It's unreal.
Yeah, they're on the wrong instrument. No, they're not on the wrong instrument. No.
Well, I have one final thing to say based on our subject here today about survival skills for the working percussionist. I was just going to mention the different things or services that I provide based on just trying to be versatile as a musician and as a professional. So some of the titles I would have would be a private percussion teacher. I'm a drummer for live and also I've done some recordings. Percussionist, that would be hand drums and other things. Live sound engineer, recording engineer, band manager. I manage some groups that can go out and play, and people would contact me first about that. I've been a clinician, an adjudicator, and lately I've been doing a lot of consulting for church sound systems. We're about to put a $20,000 system into a church here in town. They're about to order that, and we're gonna go over and get it installed. So that's something that I enjoy. Like I enjoy that just that technical part of it and
Yeah.
gear, yeah, that type of thing. So I'm happy with that. And I set out that just to say this. This is a great way to supplement your income. I'm blessed to be at a university where I make a good salary. I've got all benefits. I've got a great retirement package, and pretty soon I'll be getting Social Security. Bring it on.
Yeah.
But the supplemental pay that I get from these things, I started keeping a track of this like per year, and this is just the income that I make from doing those things there. My best year was 2022, where just doing those things outside my salary, where I was able to make 51,000 doing that.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm working it.
That's a significant amount,
Yeah.
And I think I have to mention that this is not your main thing, as in freelancing. Your main thing is teaching at the university. So, in effect, that really takes up most of your time, right?
It does.
And this is just supplemental.
Yeah. After school hours, weekends, and then occasional things here and there.
Yeah, so much to be said. I mean, you're the versatile percussionist we're talking about. You're focused on your school, your teaching, but you still do a lot outside of that. So that says a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been fortunate and blessed for this to happen, that these things can happen, and so now I don't have to seek these out, I'll get a
Right.
call on these things and just go do them.
Well, there's proof in what you do, as in you would not get called if you were not, how would I put it, proficient at what you did,
Yeah.
If you weren't not a good tech engineer, they wouldn't call you. If you didn't understand the drum line, they wouldn't call you. So it says a lot about what you've done over the years in acquiring the knowledge and the skills to do all of these things,
Yeah.
instead of just any one or two things, but many. You mentioned many things that you're able to do and survive on and thrive on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm curious, just like you. Like you have a line of things, a list of things that you're doing, not just ABOP, but all the things involved with ABOP. Like I was amazed when I came to ABOP in LA, how much you had to put together to make that work for us as the clinicians, the students, the tours, the people you're connected with. That's given to the organization. And this year is like even more.
Yeah.
ABOP in LA, and then going to the folk festival.
Right. Well, I learned through all the experiences I've had in life, and whether it's playing in the Philharmonic or teaching at a school or observing my mentor, Mitchell Peters, and seeing how he did this and that. To me, life is a learning process, and I apply it now with what I do, and I still learn from this and that and the other. So, yeah, I want to keep on learning. I want to keep on learning. Yeah.
That's great, because some people like you, when they retire, they just go home.
I think Adrian, my wife, would like that for a moment or two. But
Yeah,
that's okay. We'll get there one day.
yeah.
Ricky, this has been amazing. Excellent advice and recommendations to our listeners and percussionists. All I can say is many thanks for sharing your insights with us, and all you have done as an ABOP advisor is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. It's been great to be a part of ABOP. Thank you again.
That concludes this episode, Survive and Thrive, with ABOP advisor Ricky Burkhead, Professor of Music and Director of Percussion Studies, University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. Check the program notes for episode 22 on our website for additional helpful information. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to send an email to info@abop.us. A special thank you to our supporters and sponsors of ABOP's mentorship program. Our corporate sponsors include Black Swamp Percussion, Cooperman, Freer Percussion, Innovative Percussion, InSound Mallets, Majestic Percussion, Marimba One, Malatech, Remo, Sabian, Vic Firth, and Zildjian. ABOP is a nonprofit. Your donations are tax deductible. Check out our website, www.abop.us, for information on how you can contribute. Please follow our podcast and spread the word about ABOP. We greatly appreciate your support. We are the Alliance of Black Orchestral Percussionists, ABOP. Thank you for listening.